special, and I think that it came out in a Keys Planning Committee meeting and I'm pretty sure it was Nona that suggested, well, why don't we just get several of our Keys folks who are veterans, and if they won't agree to stand up front, do a video. And I said, that's a great idea. And so I talked with Robin, who is our communications and video specialist, and she just took it and ran with it. And she found people in the corners of the church that I didn't even know. And so we do have 14 folks that are involved in this, and we're very thankful. It's going to take our whole time up to lunch, but it's well done. Thank you, Robin, for your involvement and putting this all together. And I'm thinking this will be our best Veterans Day ever, at least in the last 9 years since I've been here. And I'm just very excited. First, I want to recognize the veterans that are here. So could you stand up? I don't know why we didn't find Larry, but he's not in the video, but he is our resident Top Gun. I just learned that last week, and everybody knows everybody else, but thank you for your service. Thank you for families that have just followed you. And then these two are veteran couples. Did either of you outrank the other? They were the same rank. That was fortunate. It's because you didn't have to salute one another when you came into the kitchen. So, is Bruce here? Okay. We'll wait a couple minutes because I don't want anybody to miss out on any of this. And there are seats up front here saved for all of you. Or you can take the back row. But so November is a short month due to Thanksgiving for us as far as Keys activities. Next week, we will have our November birthday lunch here in this room, and it'll be a Thanksgiving-themed lunch prepared by our kitchen. And we've done that the last couple of years, and they have put out a good turkey and stuffing and pecan pie, I think we've had, and so that will be our last meeting in November, because the next week is the Friday after Thanksgiving, so we won't meet then. December, the first week in December, we'll have the Cox Family Singers, along with if you were here when we had the Halloween day, we had 1,000 of the children from downstairs. Well, it seemed like 1,000, maybe 70, maybe, I don't know, but Laura told me that they would be willing to come up for our Christmas party, and so you can either sing with them or let them come in and do a song, and then we'll figure that out. But they will be here with us. So, and then on the 7th of December, that's a Sunday, we have tickets for the Sound of Music, and several of you have signed up. I'd ask you to confirm you're wanting to go, because there may be a couple of extras, and I think we have 15 tickets, and I think we have 13 people signed up. But let me confirm how many. I will let you know next week if there are tickets available, and they are $26, and it's at the Wonder Theater. And then on the 14th, I think that's the next Friday, we have been given tickets to see the most recent Lion production of David. So if you're interested in that, I'll have a sign-up sheet, but we have 30 tickets that have been donated to us to view that film. And so make sure that I don't have a sign-up today, but I'll have a sign-up on Sunday. It was a generous donation from one of our covenant partners. That will be at the Alamo Theater, I believe, over in the Quarry. So that's things coming up through the end of the year. Still working on identifying who's going to kick us off in January, but I got confirmation from the rodeo that we're going to get some people from there. We have P.V. Hill's granddaughter who will be coming and sharing about P.V. Hill. I've already talked to her that she needs to focus on his connection to this church. I don't know if you were at the Women of the Church luncheon, that it was like the song that never ended. And so she just kept on going like the ever Energizer Bunny. So we've already had that conversation that we only have an hour and we want highlights of her grandfather's influence on this church. So we're working on getting things together, and I'll be in touch with you. And Bruce is also a veteran. He snuck in late. So, without any further introduction, and you need to stay tuned for the whole thing. It's awesome throughout, but has a wonderful ending. So stay awake to the end. And I'm just excited to present this tribute to veterans, but more personally, some veterans from First Presbyterian Church.
I am Frederick Boynton Brown, and I proudly served in the United States Army Medical Corps as a physician for 20 years and retired at the rank of Lieutenant Colonel.
My name is Kenneth Miller. I was a major in the United States Air Force. I was commissioned in 1978, and I retired in 1995.
Paul Kasher, rank of Seaman, Coast Guard, from 73 to 75, stationed at the Port Safety Station in New York Harbor. Governor's Island, which is right off the tip of southern Manhattan.
My name is Gary Ryan. My rank at the time I left the Air Force was Staff Sergeant. I served for 8 years, from 1969 to 1977. I was in during the Vietnam War, and I served overseas for 2 tours. One was in Nakhon Phanom, which was in the northeast Thailand, and the other was in Utapao, Royal Thai Naval Air Station in the south of Thailand.
My name is Cynthia Robinson. I was in the United States Air Force, and when I got out, I was a captain. I served for 4 years. Join the Air Force and see the world, right? And I'm from Del Rio, and I was stationed in San Antonio the whole 4 years.
My name is Harold Black. I retired Lieutenant Colonel, and I was in the Army, intelligence, and I served from 1970 to 1992.
My name's Bill Chandler. I was a captain in the U.S. Army, and I served for 4.5 years. First 3 years were a wonderful time in Germany. The last year was in Vietnam.
Well, my name is Ronald C. Baker. I retired as an Air Force colonel, '06, full colonel. And I served basically from August of 57 until May of 1989, 32 years.
Hi, I'm Chaplain Colonel Bruce Glover. I'm retired from the Air Force, retired in 2017 after serving 31 years, 7 months, and 10 days, but who keeps track of all those days? And I've been stationed many different places. My wife and I have moved over 20 times. Our two favorite places where we were stationed were overseas in England at RAF Alconbury for 3 years in the late 1990s, and then for 2 years in Osan Air Base in South Korea.
Hi, my name's John Kaiser. I served in the Army as a chaplain. Started out as an infantry officer in the 1980s when Ronnie Reagan was my commander-in-chief. Served a total of 30 years and still serving in a part-time capacity to help out as a chaplain.
Hi, my name is Eva Eckberg, and I was a colonel in the United States Air Force, and I served for 30 years and had several duty stations in California, as well as Griffiths Air Force Base, upstate New York, where our one and only daughter was born, and in South Dakota, as well as a couple of stations here in San Antonio.
Jim Eckberg, the same as Eva with Colonel and Air Force. I served for 23 years. Stationed at Castle, Mather, Beale, and then Travis with Eva. So I have all 4 jewels of the Valley Crown tour in California. Upstate New York, like where our daughter was born, Pentagon, some overseas TUIs, South Dakota at Ellsworth. I was the commandant of the weapons school there for the bombers.
My name is Carl Cox. I was in the United States Air Force. My rank was E6, and the years I served was 20 years and 1 month.
Hi, good morning. I'm Barry Hall. I'm a member of First Press, and I'm a veteran. I was in the United States Air Force for 20 years, from 1974 to 1994. I retired as a lieutenant colonel.
Growing up on New York Harbor, I always saw, well, not always, but I saw the Coast Guard boats once in a while, and I always thought, man, I'd like to do that. I liked being on the water, so I thought, well, anyway, I was really glad I did, because I got stationed back in New York Harbor right at a boot camp, which was an unusual thing, because usually if they find out you want to go one place, they send you to the complete opposite side of the planet. So they sent me where I wanted to go, and I got just what I wanted in the Port Safety Station, to run a World War II surplus 40-foot patrol boat around Manhattan, Statue of Liberty, patrolling all around New York Harbor, and I loved it.
I am blessed to come from a military family. My grandfather graduated from Annapolis, the United States Naval Academy in 1907. He died on active duty right before World War II, and he was a contemporary of Admiral Nimitz.
We've served 189 years.
189 years.
In our families, just our families alone.
Our family. And that does not count going back to the Civil War and the Revolutionary War.
Well, I graduated from college and didn't have a job, and a family friend who was the commanding general of Air Force Recruiting Service called me one day and said he thought I should consider joining the Air Force. And so I did.
Why the Air Force? That's pretty easy. As I was growing up, my dad was in the Air Force for over 26 years. He retired as a lieutenant colonel. He was a pilot. My brother, he served the Air Force for 20 years. He was a pilot. He retired as a lieutenant colonel, so I guess it's kind of in our blood. In the 26 years my dad served, my mom kissed him goodbye 3 times. Probably more than 3 times, but 3 memorable times. She kissed him goodbye when he went to World War II. when he went to Korea, and he went to Vietnam. And he came home all 3 times. And he always used to talk about how magic my mom's kisses were, so I guess they probably were.
I came into the military as a result of something President Nixon said, that he wanted to bring peace with honor to the war in Vietnam, and I wanted to be a part of that.
I was influenced by the drafting by the Honorable Richard M. Nixon. This was back in 1972. I was living in Dallas, Texas, and I knew I was going to be inducted into the military because I had gotten my draft notice in, I believe it was in 1970. And my draft number was 27 Alpha. So I knew at some time I would be called. Well, I was living in Dallas at the time, and I decided that I did not want to go to Vietnam and shoot at someone who I didn't know and someone shoot at me that I didn't know.
So I had 2 uncles that served in World War II, both in the Army, and that service inspired me with that great Titanic battle between good and evil with the Nazis, and it was quite an inspiring thing for me as a young boy. And then also, I'm an old Eagle Scout, so as a Boy Scout, the natural progression seems to be to go into the Army, and so doing all those things that I learned in Boy Scouts, I was able to do in the Army also.
I just had always wanted to serve in the military. I thought about making a career for a long time. My brother and I both were in the military and in Vietnam, and we never discussed whether we were going in the service or whether we weren't going in the service. We just were always going in the service. So it's just, and we were the only ones in our family that were in the military. So I don't know where that came from, but it was always there.
I was born in 1945. 1.4 million males in the United States were born in 1945. And each of us came of age in 1963 when we turned 18. And we were eligible for the draft and for serving on active duty. The Vietnam War was escalating dramatically. And each one of us had to figure out what to do.
Well, I was staying in Oak Cliff in Dallas, Texas, and I went to the Singer Harris Shopping Center. And I was going to join the Navy because some of the individuals that were living in the quarters where I was staying in Dallas, they had joined the Navy. And me, a young guy, I said, I'll join the Navy and maybe I will see them. Not knowing that there were hundreds of thousands of people in the military. Anyway, I went there and the Naval recruiting office was packed. I backed off, went to my right, and guess what? It was almost like the Air Force was saying, come on down. And I did.
Well, I'm a patriotic guy, so I guess that's the base of it. But I was ordained in 1983 and served churches for about 12 years before signing up for active duty. But before I volunteered for active duty, I was in the reserve for about 10 years in the Air Force. It's the opportunity for advancement, career development, for traveling the world and ministering with basically people under 30.
I committed my life to Christ at 16 years old, heard a call to ministry at 17, had at that point decided that the Army was not going to be able to work out for me. When I went off to college and was offered an ROTC scholarship, it was actually my pastor at my home church, Second Presbyterian Church in Kansas City, who said, you might think about going into the Army because you could serve as a chaplain. So he was the one that gave me the idea to do that.
It turned out that we lived right below where an air refueling route was between points X and Y. And I really thought that was really pretty interesting. So I wanted to be a pilot or perhaps even an astronaut.
Well, what inspired me to come into the military was that my twin sister actually went into the Navy, and I was in my master's program for physical therapy at the time, and she was writing me and telling me how she was was going to breakfast in Iceland and lunch in Germany, and I thought, wow, here I am. I just finished my degrees, and now I was interning at Florida. And so I actually looked into going into the Navy, and they said, well, we only have 91 physical therapists in the Navy, and nobody ever leaves unless they die because they love it so much. And so I thought, well, that wasn't God's plan for me. So I went back to civilian physical therapy. And then a year later, a recruiter came from the Air Force and recruited me. And he asked me, what would it take to bring you into the Air Force? And I said, well, if you send me to California. And he said, really? And I said, yeah. He said, I said, well, how long do I have to stay? I said, Mama didn't raise no fool. And he said 3 years. I said, can I get that in writing? and he said yes. And so 3 years turned to 30. And I absolutely loved my career.
It made me a lot more careful about being neat, because during training, they would inspect our rooms. And if you had infractions, you got a gig. And I got gigged into the bedpost because I got too many demerits one week, so I wasn't allowed to leave the base.
The year that I started at the University of Vermont, there was a new ROTC scholarship, and I applied for it, and I earned it. And I had to perform at a high level. And of the people in the Cadet Corps, there were 2 of us that had the scholarship. And the other one was a superstar, 27-year-old dad, father of 2, and his job was managing the cafeterias on the female campus. Everybody was trained through being a cadet to be an infantry officer. And we had 6 weeks at Fort Devens, Massachusetts in the summer of 1966. And it was sobering. And then many of my colleagues went to Vietnam and died there in the conflict, including the superstar.
Went to the academy like 1 or 2 years after Vietnam was over. So I missed Vietnam, even though I was in the draft and I had my draft card and all that. But I went to the Air Force Academy for 4 years and got my degree in electrical engineering, and then I went to pilot training. 2 years at Lofton Air Force Base in Del Rio, Texas. So I got to know Texas really well. Then my training at Carsville Air Force Base in the B-52D model, and then went to Dyess Air Force Base in Abilene, Texas, where I was there for 4 years.
I wanted to be a pilot. Unfortunately, my senior year in college, I lost my pilot slot. So I came on active duty as a procurement officer. Procurement officers, we buy stuff. You want pencils, we buy pencils. You want a desk, you want a truck, we do that. And I really, really enjoyed that job. But I wanted to be a pilot. And in 1977, I got that opportunity. I got selected to go to pilot training. So Nona and I packed up and went to Columbus Air Force Base, Columbus, Mississippi. For the next 3 years, I spent my time learning how to fly.
Initial station was in Lackland Air Force Base, going through pre-flight. Then went off to learn how to fly. Moultrie, Georgia. A little sleepy little town in Georgia. There for 6 months. And then moved out of the South and moved up to Greenville, Mississippi. Finished pilot training. And went off to 3 bases in Kansas, no less. Our whole class, with the exception of 1 individual, went off to fly B-47 bombers, being introduced into the Air Force Bomber Force.
I was blessed to do well in pre-med, and then was accepted into medical school at Georgetown, which was a life changer and a tremendous blessing.
I started off in Panama. That's after language school. The Army wanted me to stay longer. I only had a 2-year obligation. So they said, if you'll stay longer, we'll give you what you liked. And so I said, well, I like school. And this is during Vietnam. So what it meant was that I would get the language school in that first assignment that guaranteed me a year on station and then go to Vietnam.
We did a lot of boarding of foreign vessels with checking for radioactivity. I don't ever think they put me in a hazmat suit, but they give me a Geiger counter and put me in a belly of a Russian tanker and had me sniffing around for radioactivity.
The Lord our God creates each one of us uniquely with skill sets and physical attributes and abilities that we are called upon to identify and to use for the kingdom and for His glory.
My faith grew as I was in the military. I didn't think it could grow any more than it did, but it did.
God was working when I did not realize He was working. Bernita had always wanted to go to Japan, even as a little girl. God granted us that wish through me being in the military for us to go to Japan. This was in 1975.
God has placed each one of us here on this earth for a purpose. We are not our own. That table is a thing. It has only one purpose: to be a platform for somebody to put something on. But humans are different. We're called for a purpose. When the country needs you, you're called to serve. If you're a civilian but not in the military, you're still called to serve. As Christians, we're called to serve one another. It's a great life. It has its risks.
The Lord used me in many ways in the military. I was able to help people. They would come to me when they had problems. My nickname was Preacher when I was in the military, in the Air Force. And a lot of times they would ask questions that they wouldn't want to ask anybody else. So I felt proud about that.
One of the overseas TDYs was at Ramstein, where I landed the first B-52 on German soil for the Flugtag in 1987. That's the largest single-day air show in Europe. We had about 650,000 people there, so pretty wild time.
My first flying assignment was in C-141s at Travis Air Force Base in California. It's about halfway between Sacramento and San Francisco. In those days in the 141 community, we would do what we called the stage. And it's a really simple concept. One air crew brings the airplane and the cargo from point A to point B. At point B, another crew is ready to take it to point C. At point C, a crew is waiting. You get the idea. And it's really efficient. It's an easy way to move airplanes and move cargoes. This is 1980. I'm at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. That's important. Clark Air Base in the Philippines. We're in the stage, we go to command post. Command post officer tells us what we're doing. Tail number's 177. It's parked on Charlie 4. Here's your load, here's where you're going. Have a nice day. He said tail's 177, and I'm thinking, I know that number, but I can't remember why, and I can't figure it out. So we leave the command post, and we go do some pilot stuff, which in those days was probably smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. We head out on the ramp, we're looking for 177, we get about halfway there, and I stop cold, and it dawns on me why 177 is so familiar to me, and why it's so important. It's 1980. 7 years before, February of 1973. 177 flies into Hanoi. 177 leaves Hanoi with a crew load of about 40 released American POWs on their way home from captivity, on the first leg of Operation Homecoming. 177 became very famous. It ended up with a call sign, and it ended up with a nickname. 177 is the Hanoi taxi. And now 8 years later, I'm fixing to fly this exact same airframe out of Clark. As I walked up the ramp that night, I looked in the cargo hold and I just imagined what it must have been like 7 years before then, when those 40 prisoners on board, first leg, heading home after so many years of captivity. And I'm getting to fly that airplane.
Going to seminary and having in mind that the Lord had called me to military ministry, it felt kind of like Brer Rabbit going back into the briar patch, but that's exactly where I wanted to be able to go back and to be able to serve with infantrymen after having been an infantryman. Just absolutely loved it. I do all the things, or did all the things as an active duty chaplain that any minister does. You know, the core competencies of ministry to preach, teach, marry, bury, and baptize. And I'm thankful that I still have that opportunity, many times in uniform, to still be able to do that, to serve the Lord, to serve the people that the Lord has placed in our lives, and to be able to love them as Christ loves them.
So one of the biggest transitions in my military career was being commissioned as a second lieutenant on the 21st of May. And because I was a regular Army officer, because of the scholarship, I had to go right on active duty. So I was assigned to Washington, D.C., to a student detachment. And on the 15th of June, a monumental day in my life and in my career, I walked into Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C. And I spent a full year rotating through Walter Reed between 1967 and when I graduated from medical school in 1971. And it was absolutely amazing.
It turns out that I was a B-52 pilot, and the aircraft that were on that area fueling route were from, many times, from Griffiths Air Force Base, where it was stationed, and I flew that route. And I thought that was kind of neat. When I was there, I was the chief of Bomber Stand Eval, standardization and evaluation. Basically, the guys with the black hats.
We had a strange situation. I worked in an air-conditioned office building, but in fact it was a warehouse that they built floors inside of, a lot like you'd see on a ranch maybe nowadays. They were offices, but the outside wall was simply a metal wall, had no insulation or anything. And one night we had one of the largest attacks we had took place on a Saturday night, and the next morning we went in, we're all in the boss's office kind of debriefing what was going on and everything. And a civilian worked for him named Larry, and he was standing next to me, and he turned sideways in the door jamb to scratch his back on the door jamb, and there was this loud crack, ring, dong, bong, and a 50 caliber machine gun round had come through the outside wall, right through the wall where Larry was standing, went into the office where the clerks were, bounced around, and hit this sweet little whack right on top of the head. And she got the bullet. Her commander wouldn't send her to get a Purple Heart, but we all thought she should have gotten a Purple Heart. It had been the highlight of her life.
Started out at Wichita, Kansas. Well, I got married along the way, right after pilot training. Went off to Wichita, Kansas for ground school on the aircraft. Then went to Salina. Got there, and my first flight in the airplane, we flew it to Alaska. It was a very unsafe airplane. Lost a lot of friends killed in that airplane.
The Lord allowed me to have a couple of times in my life, one before I went to Thailand the first time, the other was when I went the second time. He had me read the Word of God. And I wondered the first time what that was about, because I had read the Bible before, but he had me read it again. And when I went over to Thailand, I found myself helping a missionary over there with the work that he had to do. Jean and Heather Burgess were Assemblies of God missionaries. And so I went and understood at that time. And then when I went the second time, the same thing happened. And I got on my knees and I said, Lord, I need Christian fellowship. With tears, I said, I need to find a Christian community within the base. And the next day, I was asked by the fire chief to do an inspection of the officers' quarters. And I went to the officers' quarters, and a young man came up to me, and he was called to help me inspect the rooms. And we opened a room, and in that room was a large tapestry of the Lord's Supper. And I said, oh, I said, he must be a Christian. And the young man said, yes. I said, you know, I've been trying to find a fellowship on the base. And he said, I go to one. And so I began a journey during that year of going to those Bible studies every week.
Obviously, the military is not an easy way of life, so especially as a young infantry officer and serving in combat in Desert Storm, in the Cold War, in Europe. I was there when the Berlin Wall came down. It was tough. It was really tough at different times, but it always seemed to be worth the effort. And even as a young infantry officer in my chapel in Germany during the Cold War, organized a trip to go to Israel. And so there were always opportunities, always Bible studies, chapel worship, tight-knit communities, especially overseas.
All my time mostly was, besides flying, but also on alert. We did alert. And I always like to brag about it, is that you haven't really lived or experienced life too much unless you've put your arms around a nuke. We had them on the airplane. I have put my arms around a SRAM. B-61 was the dollar yield. But these were weapons that we sat on alert with, and we had to be certified for it. And some of the stuff on those weapons and everything is classified still. I can't talk about it.
Vietnam was a war where you could die at any time, and right before I got there, in the mess hall, we had these wonderful metal trays. Everybody's seen them. You probably had them in elementary school, where you got your food, and they were in racks right before you got to the cafeteria line. And right before I got there, a guy pulled one of those racks out. It was tied to a bomb, and it blew up the entire dining hall, killed lots of people. So every time I pulled the tray out of that thing, I thought about, I hope this was not hooked up to anything.
As the war changed and different people started pouring out of Vietnam, I was moved from an intelligence position to an S2 position. And so I became responsible for the defense of an area. And we had some conflicts in the Middle East, and so I had to get everything on alerts. So we did that. It was very, very simple, but safe.
177, the Hanoi taxi, is now parked at the National Museum at Wright-Patterson in Dayton, Ohio. If you've not been there, you need to go. It's an amazing place. Free admission, free parking for everyone. And aside, there's another airplane there at the National Museum, a Super Connie EC-121, tail number 555, affectionately known by a lot as Triple Nickel. My dad flew that airplane. I was on that airplane as a child in 1963 at McCoy Air Force Base in Orlando, Florida. What a magic opportunity.
My father used to say a lot of little quips, that old adages, and one that comes to my mind as I'm thinking about leadership is, to yourself be true. And it was just a phrase that he would always say, but I would expand on that little phrase that my father would say and say, yes, be true to yourself, but be true to your God. Know who you are, know what you believe, know who God is, and stand strong on that foundation.
The real sacrifice was staying true to your norms that you're with. Lots of these people that I served with were away from their families, and they forgot about what they'd said at home, and were not true to their families. No, I was very fortunate in the fact that my wife was close by.
Well, I'm glad I had the opportunity to serve, and I wish I would have done better at it. If I could do it over again, I would have done it better. And, well, I was in right at the end of Vietnam. So it was still, I'm considered Vietnam era, but there was, they were already pulling troops out of there, so there was not a big risk of me going over there. But if we did, I would have went over there under the Navy, and the Coast Guard was over there, but it just wasn't in the will of the Lord for me.
So in July, going back to 1967, I was working in the lab, the pathology department at Walter Reed, and the secretary came to me and said, "Lieutenant Brown, there's somebody from the Surgeon General's office that needs to speak with you." I said, "Well, this might be getting called to go to the principal's office. I don't know." I wasn't sure. She said, "Are you Lieutenant Frederick Brown?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I've been directed by personnel to call you and inform you that there's a new program for regular Army officers in medical school to go on active duty and to have all of your medical school on active duty with tuition, books, and fees paid, and you're getting full pay and promotions. But you have to spend an extra 4 years of payback." So my formative years of those 4 years at Walter Reed were just amazing.
When the Berlin Wall came down, and going up there to Berlin with a college buddy who was serving in the Army over there too, and to see that the efforts that we made in a small part, because we weren't there in Germany that long when the wall came down, but yes, there was quite a bit of satisfaction in that, and it really was quite an experience.
The area at Long Binh was a post in Vietnam where the Army just went out and simply cleared 5,000 acres of jungle and made it an Army post, typical kind of Army maneuver. And we lived in long plywood houses, 2 stories tall, and along the outside of the downstairs they had concrete sidewalks, and upstairs they had wooden sidewalks. And so we were in a rocket attack one night, and what in effect was Tet 2. I was there the year after Tet. And we had a lot of rockets coming right in around where we lived. And a friend of mine lived about 100 yards away, and we knew they took a direct hit. So as soon as things were calmed down, we raced over there to see if we could help or what was going on. And I remember the first room I looked inside had a gigantic red swash all across the wall. And I thought, this isn't going to be very good. And come to find out, it had been a bottle of wine on top of a wall locker. It had been blown off. But my friend was in the next room, and you simply had a 1/4-inch plywood dividing one room into 2 rooms. And he'd been lying on his cot, dangling his leg off the side, and he said he had never done that before. And after the alert was over, the attack was over and the alert sounded, a buddy of his said, "Hey, you're wounded." And so he said, "No, I'm not." So he looks at his legs bleeding. So I didn't know that part. We just knew he'd been medevac to a hospital. And to this day, I don't do hospitals well anyway. But the next day, a friend of mine and I went to visit him in the hospital, and when he walked through an Army hospital in a war zone, you see all manner of things I don't want to discuss. I mean, you can't miss missing arms and legs and awful stuff. And I just had no idea how my buddy was. And we rounded a corner. The guy was propped up in bed reading a magazine, smiled, waved at us. He was in a real good mood. And we're like, "What happened to you?" A piece of shrapnel went through his calf. It didn't hit a nerve, bone, nothing important. He got it bandaged up, got a Purple Heart, got to go home 6 weeks early, and we all went, "I'll take one of those."
I think it's a great way of life. I think we had some separations here and there, but I think that I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and
And whistle. He was so happy.
and to go, for an early morning show, take off. So.
And I'd be grousing because I'd have to get up 4 hours later to go to work.
She'd be grousing, shh, turn off that light, and I'd just get up and I'd be happy to go, and getting dressed was really easy. I'd just slip one leg and the other leg, one arm and the other arm in a green bag, big zipper up front, and I'm good to go.
I really grew to appreciate the fact in Vietnam, after Germany, but in Vietnam, how most of the people in the world simply don't want anybody to bother them. They have no interest in politics, no interest in international intrigues and taking over other countries. And each officer in the area where I lived had basically a maid or a cleaning lady that cleaned your room, made your bed, and ironed all your clothes. We had starched, clean clothes every day in Vietnam. I've never had that since. But one day she came in and told me her son had been killed by the Viet Cong, which was really ugly. And I think that's the day I decided that we really should be more knowledgeable and think about the fact that most people in the world are just people. And they simply don't want all the excitement that the politicians and the big war leaders get us into.
They have to understand that we do it for a reason. I always wanted to fly airplanes, and I wanted to join the Air Force. My dad was an officer, so it's a voluntary thing, and it's not because we like to go to war or we'd like to fight. It's part of the job, but somebody's got to do it, and for life and country. People don't understand that we have an awful lot of freedom here in the United States that we wouldn't have if we didn't have the military, we didn't have the government that we have.
It's not a happy or good kind of experience, but it's very, very meaningful. What we call the dignified transfers. I was stationed not actually on the front lines, but in the rear echelon, and they would bring the prepared bodies during Iraqi freedom and during freedom. They would bring the prepared bodies on a C-130 or 141 at first, or a C-17. And they were all in caskets, and when they landed, there would be a dignified transfer for the remains to be brought off, and all of the Air Force and other personnel would line up and render honors, and there would be a brief prayer for the deceased that were on board. And then you would do it in reverse and put them on the aircraft. So those dignified transfers, we call them, were an amazing expression of support and reverence for the sacrifice that, in a general sense, all of us were making, but in a particular sense, the sacrifice that those individuals who were making the ultimate sacrifice.
If I would have been serving the Lord in the military, I might have stayed in 30 years. I liked it that much. I liked all of what the Coast Guard did.
My last assignment in the Air Force was the commander of a major unit at Randolph, doing occupational analysis and testing to make certain the training done in the schoolhouse was what was actually being done in the field. Because so often in the university systems where I had my fellowship, they teach what they want to teach, but it isn't always exactly what's going on out in the real world. And so I had 250 people, most of them psychologists. We did a major job, and it was fun.
The re-entry onto active duty was amazing, connecting with people in the chaplaincy corps that I'd known from Fort Carson and from other places. And I was assigned to be a liaison with the chaplaincy corps and to teach in their clinical pastoral education course. And that expanded my role as a servant healer as well as a Christian. And it was a wonderful aspect of my career.
I think the deployments really were formative. I deployed several different times. I was involved in several different operations, Iraqi freedom, enduring freedom, and also the first desert wars. And so I was involved in all of those to some degree. And when you deploy, you're away from your family, you're relying on yourself and God to direct you, and the intensity of those situations really deepened my faith and trust in God, as well as deepened my abilities and my skill as a chaplain, but it really had an impact on my faith, yeah.
My faith came after I had joined the military. I am really blessed with how I see now that God is always working in our lives, even when I did not know he was working. I'd always heard of him. I've heard of this man called Jesus. I went to church. I sang in the junior choir. I sang even in as long ago as the Sunbeam Choir, they called it. Celestial Choir, the young adult choir. I sang about this individual, but I never knew him.
Coming into the military, when we were in the military, to be in the military and to be, away from your families, and then when you've made friends and now you're going with TDY, which is temporary duty, and you may be gone for a month, but you could be gone for a year, 2 years, 3 years. You have to have some kind of strength, inner strength that can come only from the Holy Spirit, where you really have to rely on God as your Heavenly Father, as your mentor, as your strength.
I met this individual by the name of Augustus Robinson. He was in the military also. We were out on the flight line. I was in communications, crypto, and he was a helicopter mechanic. And we met cross paths one day, and he said, "Hello, my brother, how are you doing?" And I began to tell him how I was doing. He asked me about my weekend, and I told him all the things that had happened that weekend. That's why I've learned to not talk so much and to be a closer. Anyway, he began to, as I told him about the things I'd done that weekend, I'd gone to the football game on base, I had my bottle of Boone's Farm, etc., etc. Then he let me finish, and he says, "My name is Reverend Robinson. I wanted to crawl under a rock, but there were no rocks on the flight line." And he said, "I'm starting a Wednesday evening gospel service, and I want to invite you and your family." Guess what? The only thing that came out of my mouth was, "We will be there." That was the beginning of my understanding of who this man Jesus is. I won't say was, is.
Well, if you're raised in a Christian home and you know what to do to serve the Lord, it would be advantageous for you to do it before you went in the military, and you will be a rare exception to the rule, serving the Lord in the military, because there weren't many men who had what it took to stand up for the faith in the military. I wish I would have been one of them, but unfortunately I wasn't. If I could do it all over again, I would have liked to have been a witness for the Lord instead of the person that I was.
I think it's a great opportunity for young men and women to figure out how to serve their country, but also they can serve the Lord at the same time too, and be involved as a Christian. And there'll be many times, just like in businesses, that you may find yourself as the only Christian in that particular unit that you're working with, and that's an opportunity that the Lord has given you to be able to stand up for what you believe in Jesus Christ.
I believed very strongly that America is a unique place, and that America was shaped by the Christian faith. And so it just kind of all flowed together. It wasn't any aha moment or anything. It was just, that's the way I grew up. That's what I believed. And I was happy to join the Air Force because I strongly believed that America was in the right.
I think everyone, in any country, I think everyone should do national service when they get out of high school, roughly 18 years old. I think everybody should do 2 years of service, and it could be in the military, it could be in the park rangers, it could be candy strippers in a hospital, it could be whatever volunteer work would help sustain the country and pay back some of the debt you get for living in the country where you are, especially Americans who have the greatest country in history. And far too many young people, I think, don't appreciate the value of this country and being born here.
For a lot of people, I noticed this especially in the Presbyterian Church, people struggled with whether or not people should even be in the military or not. And so it made me dive into the scriptures to look at that, how a Christian could serve in the military, that paradox between do not murder. And so I was able to look at that and to be able to work through that with the help of other mature Christians at the time too, and see that Jesus had a great affinity for soldiers, especially soldiers that were in positions of authority, where even the first non-Jewish Christian, a guy by the name of Cornelius of the Italian regiment, he was a centurion, and he had the honor of being the first non-Jewish Christian in Acts 10.
I think that people should know that there is a sense of integrity. If you don't have integrity in your unit, in your squadron, you need to get it right away. And I think leading by example is extremely important.
And it's a servant leadership.
Yeah, it is a servant leader. And you know, you follow the creed of service before self and excellence in all you do.
I wish that more people understood that it is a very necessary part of our democracy. If we don't have a strong military and a military that has committed people, then we're not safe. There are a lot of people in this world that would like to take us down. And a strong military is one component of a strong democracy.
I would encourage young men, no matter which service they choose, to be a part of the military. You grow up in the military, and you learn a lot. If you're not sure what you want to do in the civilian world, the military is a good place to learn skills and to take those skills when you leave the military and use them in the civilian life.
There are things that I've seen that have changed from the time that I came in to what I have experienced even now when I am on base. Sometimes there's a lot of changes, but it is a program, like I say, to transition us from a previous life to a now life. And we've got to be a unit.
I would want our two grandchildren, Amelia and Elspeth, to know that service is far more important than any accolade or any achievement that you can do on your own. To be a part of an institution or an effort that is worthy and godly and good beyond yourself, and to make a meaningful contribution to that, is one of the greatest purposes in life that you can find. And I think I found that in serving as a chaplain.
I retired from the Air Force in 1994 on a Friday, February the 12th. Drove out the front gate in my flight suit. Monday morning I drove back through the front gate, this time in a shirt and tie. Coming back from my second career, this time I spent 21 years as an Air Force contractor. teaching flight simulator training and classroom academics.
As a colonel, my last 8 years of service was being the consultant to the Surgeon General for physical therapy, occupational therapy, and orthotics. And I was also what was called the Biomedical Science Corps commander, which meant that all the people in the Air Force, outside of doctors and nurses, everyone, veterinarians, lab officers, dietitians, PTOT, orthotics, all those folks were...
Cats and dogs.
Yeah, cats and dogs, we called them. Yeah, it was herding cats and dogs. But they were all under me. And it says a lot for an organization as big as the government is to give opportunities to women equally to men.
Working with the young women who were applying to become, part of the Air Force. I got my job after I got out of officer training school was as a recruiting officer at the detachment level. The detachment was down where the old Arsenal complex was, and so when the recruiters would get prospects, they would bring them to me, and I would tell them about women in the Air Force. Women in the Air Force were an important part of the Air Force, and did all kinds of jobs. We didn't fly because that came later, but women did just about everything else.
I believe that military service, it is a calling. You have to have a desire to serve for whatever the reason is. I think probably as you want to have a sense of belonging. There is an esprit de corps among your co-workers, and I think in times of battle, if you ask anybody who you're fighting for, you're fighting for your buddy next to you. You're fighting for the guys in the other airplanes as you go in together.
Put the Lord first, and everything else will fall in line. Know what you're getting into, count the cost. I mean, if you're going to join the Marines, you can expect to be at the tip of the spear, and then there's variations of, whether in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, or the Coast Guard could see wartime activity also. They go in under the Navy if it got that serious. But you never know what to expect. You never know what to prepare for. But if the Lord is the primary thing in your life, He'll take care of that for you. He'll help you through whatever you have to go through.
There's several different times in my life where they were very stressful, challenging situations, and I wasn't afraid. I took courage and strength from knowing who I was, what beliefs I had, and what God has said God is, and what God would do.
And we see even in our neighborhood the stars that are in the window. You might not know the stars in the window is a designation that this home has lost a soldier.
A gold star.
Gold star.
Yeah.
And
blue star is, it tells how many someone is in service.
Yeah.
At that time.
Veterans Day is an important holiday. I mean, I know it's a holiday in this country, but it's so important to recognize the service of the people who have served, and some of them have served at great cost to themselves and their families. And so I think it is very important that we recognize that they have given a gift to this country in terms of their time and their service.
Veterans Day, that is the day that we celebrate the lost lives, the lost memories, the lost capacities of the individuals who were in the military, fought for their country, and either are gone on to be with the Lord or still here and they're still fighting trials through trials and tribulations from the experience of being in war.
Veterans. We all know veterans. Family members, friends, neighbors. We see them on the streets. We see them in the restaurants. They have their hats on, Gary Ryan. They have a t-shirt, they have a jacket. Something identifies them as a vet. 2 challenges for you. Challenge 1, the next time you meet a vet, thank them for their service. Thank them for their commitment to your country. And then watch their reaction and listen to their reply. And if by chance you know that that veteran is married and has a spouse and has children, thank the spouse and the children too, because they have served, they have sacrificed. Now the spouse may not have deployed to the sandbox. The kids have probably never gone on a remote TDY, but they've served and they've supported. Thank them. They moved every 3 or 4 years.
To me, it's an opportunity to celebrate anybody who put on the uniform in service to their nation. We've been doing that since 1775, and it's an incredible opportunity to say thanks to veterans. So I encourage everybody to say thanks, to be able to recognize that they took a few years or a few decades out of their life to do something that was bigger than themselves, to take care of this nation that we love, that has given us freedom of religion to be able to be. And that's why the churches flourish in the United States, where many times in Europe they're not. Because we have free exercise of religion to be able to serve and to be faithful to our Lord.
I admire and respect veterans, especially those that saw combat. And you see guys that come back with 1 arm, 1 leg, and you realize what a precious thing it is that these men gave that much for the freedoms that we take for granted here. So it means a lot to me as I look up for those who paid a whole lot more of a price physically than I did.
Still a patriot. I love this country. I pray for this country every day.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
for all.
for all.
For all.
For all.
Enough said, I think, except for thank you. Thank you for everyone in this room that has participated in this video, but also everyone in this room who has served. And thank you again to Robin, who was instrumental in getting all these folks together. Probably knows this video by heart by now. And it is our celebration and our privilege to have all of you as a part of our lives and as a part of our church. I learned something new about everyone who spoke in this video. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We will have it posted on where all of the keys speakers have been posted eventually. And then we can get copies, I'm sure. It's going to take some time. But if you want a copy, if you want to have access to a copy, certainly talk to me or talk to Robin, and we'll make sure that you have that. Well, it's time to have lunch together. I understand I saw the ketchup bottles on the table, and I walked in the door. I said, I wonder what's for lunch. And I understand that we're having hamburgers today. This is our Veterans Day picnic. But you know how good the hamburgers are that come out of that kitchen. So that's just a sneak peek for what we're going to have for lunch. Make sure you sign up for the things coming up. The red buckets on the table is for our gift to our household staff who serve us very well. And then there's also a sign up on the table. We're partnering with PCHAS, Presbyterian Children's Home and Services, this year at Christmas. And there's opportunity for us to purchase items to go into Christmas stockings for families that are at PCHAS serves families and offers housing and a lot of instruction and comes along beside them. If you want to know more about PCHAS, talk to Suzanne. She's our resident expert on what PCHAS does. So if you would, basically there's items on the list that need 15 of them because there's going to be 15 stockings stuffed. It'll be explained well when you see it, and sign up for those items. We are quickly going into Advent. Thanksgiving is the beginning of my Christmas. So be sure that you take note of what's going to be happening here through Advent and through Christmas, hopefully preparing us to celebrate God's special gift of Jesus Christ in our lives. So let's enjoy the time that we have to celebrate what God has done for us. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for this time together to celebrate our veterans. We're thankful for what they gave and the time that they spent away from family, the time that they spent taking care of the things that we don't even want to think about. And the end result is the freedoms that we enjoy. We're so thankful for the veterans in this room, in this church, in this community. And we lift them up to you and pray that you would walk with them and guide and direct them. And thank you for the opportunity that we have to celebrate their service. Thank you for this food that we will enjoy together, for the fellowship around these tables, and pray that you would just give us good conversation and prepare us now as we are approaching Advent to prepare our hearts to have a better understanding of your love for us that was demonstrated in that while we were still sinning, you sent Jesus Christ to be our Lord and Savior. Thank you for today. Go before us in everything that we say and do. In Jesus' name.